Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is about getting ready to put my new steel boat up on the hardstand and is proudly sponsored by marineengine.com. I was really pleased to see that you guys are as excited about this boat as I am, because I think it does give us a great opportunity to look at some more big boat systems, as well as looking at some aspects of cruising, like living on board, navigation, all that kind of stuff. There were so many comments in that video, I'm not sure I'm going to get a chance to reply to them all individually, so I thought I'd cover a few of the questions. One question which I think is entirely valid is, what's cheap, you know? And it's true, it's all relative. Because YouTube's an international platform, we'll talk in US dollars. So I got this boat for just under 7,000 US dollars, which is less than a 60 horsepower E-Tech is to buy new in Australia anyway. So it gives you an idea of the relative value. So although $7,000 is still a lot of money, I think for what you get, it represents really good value. I think you only have to look at the sort of equipment alone, look at things like the Detroit Diesel 471, the radar, sonar, GPS, all that kind of stuff, and it adds up if you're trying to fit out a boat yourself. So I definitely think there is some good value to be had. I didn't put the boat on the slip before I bought it because I was sort of a little bit worried about missing out on it, so I went for a scuba dive around it, also just to scrape the prop to get it up the coast, and also had a good look through all the bilges. These steel boats tend to rust from the inside out a lot of the time, and the bilges look pretty tidy. People are also saying, hey, it doesn't look that rusty, why do you say it's a rusty boat? And I'll show you the rust we're going to be working on today, but one of the main areas is the engine room. It's had salt water dripping in there forever, and I am a little bit worried about the hull directly below the stern gland where it's dripping, because that's just had salt water dripping on it for decades. So that's something I'll be paying very close attention to on the hardstand. Okay, enough yakking, let's go and have a look at the rust I'm going to be dealing with on the deck here. There's a lot of these kind of spots. This one's probably one of the deepest, but I'm going to have to get the needle scaler right in here, clean this right up to bare metal, and then on a case-by-case basis figure out whether I'm just going to put epoxy filler, then paint, or whether I'm going to need to do some welding. So you can see sections of deck like this, there's quite a bit of it. A lot of it's not that bad. I think it will be more a case of just needle scaler and epoxy filler. So here and over here were two tow posts on the boat, or an A-frame, something along those lines. I think the previous owner cut these off and left the plates on. So I'm going to get an angle grinder through the weld down at a bit of an angle and see if we can pry both these plates off the deck. As with the doublers we were talking about, anytime you've got two sheets of metal next to each other, if water gets in between, you can get a whole lot of rust you don't know about until it comes right through. So we'll be getting those off today, hopefully. Also, you can see where the posts were here when it rains or waves come over the back. This just fills with water and holds water, which is a shocker as well. Over here, I think there was some sort of stainless fitting coming through the deck, which has obviously reacted badly with the mild steel. So I'm going to have to cut this out and weld a new plate in. You can see, hopefully, it's actually gone through here too, which is where the engine cover is. So we'll have to have a look at how well we can repair that as well. I'll take this fitting off and then just get the needle scaler right into the corner. This boat's going on the hardstand in exactly 1 week from today. So this next week for me is all about getting ready for that to happen. And I guess what I mean by that is figuring out as much as I can of what needs doing, ordering as many parts as I'll need, because I don't want to get onto the hardstand, it's only there for 3 days, suddenly I realise I need a part that's going to take 5 days to arrive. So it's really about preparing to make the most value out of the money I'm going to spend putting it on the hardstand. So this means learning about the problems the boat has in advance, maybe measuring some stuff up so I can order parts. Also means buying the tools I need and the materials I need. What do I need in the way of primers, anti-fouls, fittings, all that kind of stuff. A lot of marinas will supply some of that stuff, so you can buy anti-foul from them by the litre rather than buying a 10-litre can or whatever. But I'll give them a call, figure out what they can supply, what they can't, to make sure that I'm all prepared for that day. Obviously things I can do on the water, I'm going to do on the water, because that hardstand time is expensive, so I really want to limit that to things I can only do when the boat's out of the water. If you're looking at getting a boat like this and doing this sort of job, I'll go through everything in a fair bit of detail, because I think, it's the sort of thing I like to hear anyway. So one of the first things I'm going to use now that I bought recently was just an extra long extension cord. I want to be able to reach the whole boat. I don't know where power points are going to be at the marina, so you know, I don't think it hurts to have a couple of long extension cords. Also, just randomly while I think of it, one of the other things I'm going to need to organise is an extension ladder, because once the boat's up on the hard stand, it's quite a long way from the ground up over the railing, so I'm going to need some way to get in and out. The first tool I'm going to be using today is just a normal 240 volt angle grinder. I think this is a 125mm. That's all well and good, should last the job, but what I also have is a stack of thin cutting discs, because I'm going to need to do quite a bit of cutting. Some of these sort of nylon pads, some flat discs like this, and some thicker grinding discs like this. Forgot to mention also a couple of these stainless knotted wire cups. That's the one there. It's worth having a fair supply of those things because you do burn through them pretty fast, and an hour or two running up to the hardware store and back is an hour or two that you're wasting of your hardstand time if you run out on the job. Another tool on a similar line I'll be taking is a needle scaler like this, which is an air chisel with a needle scaler attachment, which is awesome for just chipping all that rust off, but we'll be using this when we're on the hardstand. Lots of paint's going to be coming off which can't go in the water, so I'll probably have myself on this and probably a friend on a vacuum cleaner at the same time. Maybe we'll block the scuppers, but we need some way of containing all that paint and rust. Rust not such a big issue, paint definitely bad. Alright, time to get out in the sun and see if I can cut these plates off. When I started cutting this plate off, I had a mate of mine, Jeff, turn up and give me a hand. Jeff actually did his apprenticeship making submarines, so he's sort of pretty familiar with metalwork. And in the lieu of an oxy torch, which he would have loved to have had, we just started cutting through this plate and eventually just bashing it off with a hammer, so we sort of got there mostly. I made a bit of a rookie mistake afterwards though, in that we had a bit of a storm come through and I sort of just headed inside and chilled out, and of course all the grinding turned to rust, so I now have a bit of a bright orange deck. I'm not too worried about it though, because my understanding is I'll be able to just put some dilute phosphoric acid on it, turn it into ferric phosphate, which is then water soluble, and I should be able to gurney it. I'm also doubly not worried because my plan is to repaint the whole deck anyway, but it was certainly a bit of a trap for young players, and something I'll look at in the future is just cleaning up straight away. So anyway, there you go, learn from my mistakes. The starboard side plate is pretty much off now, so one last little bit to get off because I ran out of cutting discs, but we'll go and do the same thing now for the port side. With the starboard side, I originally started trying to cut down at an angle here just through the weld, and it didn't seem to be working. I didn't really know how it was fully attached. So in the end, I cut a square, pulled the center section out. Here it is, you can see it's about 10mm thick. And then we were able to get a bar, and because I'd already done some cuts in these welds, I was able to break these bits off reasonably well, except for this bit, which I need to cut again. Over here on the port side though, this time I'm just going to sort of have faith that there is nothing under here at all in the way, and I'm just going to keep cutting through this weld until I can get a cold chisel underneath it and just lift the whole plate off in one piece. That's my plan anyway. So, got plenty of cutting discs again, time to get grinding. I've cut in with the angle grinder all round the weld now, so now I'm going to get the cold chisel in and see if I can get it to start to lift. Once I had the plate off, I just used a flat disc to grind down the sharp edges of the weld that had been cut, and then I just used a wire wheel to clean up some of the surface rust. I haven't ground everything down completely flat yet and smooth because I'm not decided what I'm going to do here. I've just put a coat of cold gal on from a can. It's a few days later now, so it's already starting to spot rust, but just to keep the rust at bay a little bit until I mix up a batch of epoxy primer to do the whole deck. Now, when I was just chipping away with the hammer, there's a few little sections like this where the rust has gone all the way through the deck. So this is, I think, one of the worst sections on the boat, but until we chip these sorts of things off, you never know. Sections like this are sort of raised up, but not really till you chip them off. That one's actually not too bad, that you discover whether you've got something like this. Around these deck fittings, I think is where the worst corrosion is, or the worst rust. Everywhere there's sort of something holding the water back, it seems to be, you know, pretty bad. But everywhere else, it seems relatively superficial. So what I need to decide now is how I'm going to repair those, not just the rust, but the holes right through. I've got three main options. One is put a plate over the top, which is kind of what I just took off, so it seems a bit pointless. I thought they were a trip hazard on the deck, so although I have been convinced that patches have their place, in this case I don't think it's a good sort of situation to use one. My other options are keep chipping it away, clean it up, epoxy prime it, then put some epoxy filler and then paint the deck. It'll look nice, and to be honest, it'll probably be strong enough. The holes are small enough and there's enough good metal around it that it's not going to collapse. It's not like the whole deck is thin, so that's an option. The other option is to simply cut that whole section out, weld in a brand new plate, clean it up, prime it, paint it. Not 100% sure which way I'm going to go, definitely not the patch way, but we'll see how it goes. I do have to cut a new patch definitely for the section around the engine combing, so what I think I'll do is I'll do that first because I have to, see how it goes. If it ends up being pretty easy, then I think I'll just do it with the other section. If it turns out to be kind of fiddly and tricky, then I might just epoxy the other section to start with and then maybe look at it in another year's time or whatever. One of the things in this book I've been reading that I introduced last video, he talks about is the longevity of certain repairs. And he said, look, if a boat's got a 5-year lifespan left, whack a patch on. The patch will last 5 years, enjoy those 5 years traveling, you know, write the boat off. And I think that's really good advice. You just have to look at the situation, look at your plans, make a decision about what works best for you. People will sort of always say, no, this is the one and only way to do something, and it's obviously not the case. I went today and I bought 5 litres of phosphoric acid, getting ready for going on the slip on Friday. And coincidentally, the guy who I bought it from also has a steel trawler. He said his is very rusty and he bought it for about $2,000. So it's interesting, I think. It'd be nice to see it one day and get a sense of, you know, where on the spectrum, if you spend $2,000, you got this, if you spend 5, 10, whatever, you know, what you can kind of expect in the way of fit out and hull condition. Anyway, I'm glad we got that now, ready to go on Friday. I'll tinker a little bit more on deck over the next few days, but the next video is when we go up on the hardstand, so we'll finally sort of see truly what we're up against. Alright, what I'm going to do now is head down to the engine room for a few moments where it's nice and private and measure my shaft. The reason I'm measuring the prop shaft is so that I can buy the correct packing I need to stop the leak on the stern gland. Also, last time I forgot to mention, this boat has a hot water heater and some pumps installed that runs off, it's a heat exchanger that runs off the engine. So it's not plumbed in at the moment, but that'll be quite nice to have down the track if I do a bit more cruising. So here's our leak still. It actually looks a little bit slower than it was before, so maybe after tightening this stern gland and running the motor, the packing's compressed a bit, it might have moved. So I've got this micrometer that I'm going to put around the shaft. We don't need huge accuracy, but it's just an easy way to get the diameter. So I'm just running it up and down just to see that it's just touching the widest point. Otherwise you could be measuring, you know, a narrower point higher up. That seems about right. So here you can see it's saying about 57 millimeters. We'll come back inside because it's a little bit windy out there for the microphone, but 57 millimeters is 2 1/4 inches, so that's what I'm going to run with. I would like also to measure the outer diameter, which gives you the space that the wadding is going to fill, but I'll need a larger sort of micrometer or something to wrap around and get that one. But once we got those 2 measurements, we should be able to buy the packing we need. While we're in here, last week I didn't show you the little kitchenette that's in the wheelhouse, so I'll show you that now. Nothing to really write home about, but a little sink here with a tap here. Don't know what that's connected to because we don't have a freshwater tank yet as far as I know. Here's a little gas stove and the gas bottle's outside where it should be. And then below here is just a little 12-volt fridge with canned fish to bring bad luck. People have expressed a bit of interest in the budget for this project, and so what I've decided to do is make a Google Docs spreadsheet, and I'll then share that online as a read-only spreadsheet. So if people want to see exactly what it's cost to get this boat up to scratch, then you can take a look there. So I'll put the link in the description of each video once I've got that up and running. Alright, well take care and I'll catch you next week once we've got this up on the hardstand. See ya.